I was only 10 years old at the time. My baby sister Leah was 4, which was typically the normal age for kids to create imaginary friends. So you can understand why when she began telling me and my parents about someone she called the Raincoat Man, we all thought it was simply a figment of her imagination. Being only 10, I didn't pay much attention to Mia or much of the stories she told me about the Raincoat Man. That started to change though when Leah began spending more and more of her time staring at my dad's old raincoat that was hooked on our wooden coat rack stand. She would spend hours a day talking to that old coat, with sporadic gaps of silence in between, like the coat was talking back to her in a volume that only she could hear. That creeped me out, and I had no problem calling my sister a weirdo because of it. Of course, that bothered her every time, so being 10 and her bigger sister, that fueled me to keep teasing her, but it was all in youthful play. In the days following Leah's sudden and rapidly growing fascination with my dad's old raincoat, my mother started to think her pastime was becoming an unhealthy obsession. One day I came home to Leah crying and screaming hysterically. I had no idea what was happening. I had never seen her act out like that before. She was downright irate. My mother was trying to control her, but nothing she said or did worked. When I asked my mom what was going on, she told me that she had taken the coat rack along with my dad's old raincoat and locked them away in a small room in our basement, which upset Leah greatly. Despite that, my mother felt that what she was doing was the best thing for Leah and refused to waver on her decision. Leah continued to weep until the night, which was really nerve-wracking for me because I shared a room with her and her crying was interfering with my sleep. My dad must have felt bad for her because shortly after we were sent to bed, he came into our room carrying the coat rack and his old raincoat. Leah excitedly jumped out of her bed and gave my dad a loving hug as he set the stand down in the corner of our room and hung his old raincoat on it. Leah asked if she could read the Raincoat Man a story before she went to bed, and I heard my father tell her sure, just so long as she did it quietly so she didn't disturb me, and went to bed immediately afterwards. My father kissed her goodnight as she climbed into the rocking chair next to the coat rack, and then he kissed me goodnight too before heading out of our room. Calm for the first time since I gotten home, Leah began reading from her favorite book, Green Eggs and Ham, while I buried my head under my pillow trying to drown her out. Despite my best efforts, I could still hear her reading. She then abruptly stopped reading like something had distracted her. I didn't pay much notice since I was so tired, but that's when I heard her say, "I'm not ready to go. I haven't said goodbye to everybody yet." From under my pillow I yelled out, "Who are you talking to, weirdo?" Then Leah said to me, "Sherry, can you tell Daddy and Mom I said goodbye and that I loved them?" I raised my head from under the pillow and looked over at her. I asked her where she planned on going, and then she said she was going bye-bye with the Raincoat Man. I said yeah right and called her a weirdo once more before plopping my tired head back into my pillow. She then said, "I love you too, Sherry. I'll miss you most." I answered her by saying, yeah, weirdo. Now go to sleep." I dozed off shortly after that, but woke up later that night to go to the bathroom. When I got up, I saw Leah fast asleep in the rocking chair with her favorite book in her lap. I started to put her in her bed, but decided I'd go to the bathroom first. When I got back into our room, I screamed out in terror as my father's old raincoat seemed to suddenly come to life, taking the form of a giant, lanky man who began looming over my sleeping little sister. I ran to go get my parents, but by the time we got back to my room, Leah was gone. Strangely enough, so is my father's old raincoat. Leah hasn't been seen or heard from ever since. It's been 31 years since my little sister went missing, but I can still remember the events and details of that night like they just happened yesterday. My mother never stopped grieving and my father never forgave himself. Both died in their early and late 50s, my mom from a stroke and my dad from a heart attack. Considering their ages, they both died relatively young. I strongly believe that their bodies simply gave out as a result of years of endless mental stress and heartache. I'm a grown woman now, with children of my own, but I still harbor my fair share of guilt for my actions that night. Instead of running to my parents' room, I should have gotten Leah out of our room the second I saw the figure in the raincoat. I should have really listened to her when she told me she was going bye-bye with the Raincoat Man and talked her out of it. I should have been a better, bigger sister and spent more time with her so she would have never needed the Raincoat Man in the first place. For all the things I could have done but didn't do, there's still the one thing I can do today that I wish I would have done that night. And that is to tell my sweet little sister, hoping she can hear me from wherever she is, I love you too, Leah, and not a single day goes by that I don't miss you. And for anyone who's listening to me now, I issue this warning to you. Beware of the imaginary friends your siblings or children say they have. They might not be so imaginary after all.